Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. Now, Maserati has just unveiled their latest crossover SUV, and what we're gonna do in this video is of course talk about some of the spec and tech, and then I'm gonna jump into Photoshop because we need to talk about this seemingly brand new design language for Maserati when it comes to SUVs, and I'm gonna let you know exactly what I think about it. So competing with models such as the Porsche Macan, the Alfa Romeo Stelvio, the all-new luxury SUV Maserati Grecale will go on sale in the US this summer. The 2023 Grecale is smaller than the Levante, and it will come with either a turbocharged 4-cylinder, a twin-turbo V6, or as a full EV a little later in the Folgore trim. It's a little larger than the main competitors such as the Porsche Macan and the Alfa Romeo Stelvio, but the power is still there, of course, in a true Maserati fashion. There are 3 internal combustion engines to choose from, starting with the base GT spec, and this comes with a turbocharged 2-liter inline-four, which is connected with a 48-volt hybrid system and makes a total of 296 horsepower and 332 pound-feet of torque, which I think isn't bad for a base trim. Then you have the Modena, which bumps the power up to 325 horsepower, and the top of the line is of course called the Trofeo, and this has a detuned version of the same engine that you find in the MC20 supercar, and this makes 523 horsepower and 457 pound-feet of torque. It's not bad, but not quite as much as we have in the MC20's 621 horsepower and 538 pound-feet of torque. The base 4-cylinder model is still pretty quick with a 0 to 60 time in just over 5 seconds. The Trofeo cuts this time down to 3.6 seconds and an unlimited top speed of 177 miles per hour. All Grecales come with an 8-speed automatic transmission and all-wheel drive as standard. On the inside, we have the gauge cluster and the central infotainment as digital screens, both measuring 12.3 inches. In addition to those, there is a smaller 8.8-inch touchscreen just underneath the infotainment system for various controls such as the climate and so on. Its pricing is still Maserati-like, with the base starting at $65,000, which is a lot more than the base Macan at $56,000. And pricing for the Trofeo hasn't really been made public yet, but you can expect it to start over $80,000, with the Modena trim sitting somewhere in between, of course. And as mentioned earlier, the Grecale will go on sale in the US later this summer. Now let's jump into Photoshop here and let's talk about this design, because there's a lot to talk about here. This is a brand new design language. I mean, not for Maserati in general, but for Maserati SUVs. I'm going to compare this to the Levante in just a minute so you can see the differences, the big differences, and the philosophies, specifically in the graphics in the front end here, and what's different between the two. So overall, I think this is a really beautiful looking small crossover. It has almost an unlikely, but for Maserati, but it's almost a friendly face. Specifically looking at the graphics of the headlight, they sit further up right here compared to the Levante, for example. As I said, I'm going to show you that in a second. And then we have the typical for the MC20. It's almost like they took an MC20 and just stretched out the front end. It still looks pretty good. There are a few things that I would maybe want to change. For example, this folding of the body over the intake right here, this little fold, I kind of want to have maybe some plastic trim piece continue down here to make it look like it's not just cut off there. It has a weird little cut when you look at it. It looks like it's almost folding over the intake, this yellow body, if that makes sense. But other than that, it's a clean Maserati grille. We have the typical dip right here in the middle of Maserati, and of course the logo in the middle. And what Maserati does now with the grills is they have it concave, so we have these bars going this way instead of going convex like this, which we've seen in previous Maseratis way back. And then we have the body color stopping right here, so we have these 2 fender lines or wings cutting in, and then we have the front end air intake down here. It looks like maybe this is carbon fiber or something carbon fiber look-alike material. It looks pretty good overall. There's not much to say about the front end except for it feels like a stretched out MC20. Now, looking at the side view, this is where things get a little more interesting, because to me it kind of feels a little heavy. It feels like it's a little bloated maybe, and the reason for that is this part right here. So we have these things in the front end, then we have this little section down here, and some part of the rear, maybe this part in the back. They are all body colored, and what this does, it brings the mass of the car down to the ground. I'm gonna compare this also to the MC20 in a second. I'm gonna show you what I think Maserati could have done differently here to just reduce the visual weight, and it's a really simple change, and that change would be to make those pieces black. So I'm gonna show you that right now. If we copy those and then we go into and desaturate these pieces and then maybe make them a little blacker than that, so we have them in line with everything else, you can see that the visual weight of the car, it kind of gets reduced, and it feels a little slimmer this way than if we have it in body color like this. And also, since it's an SUV, I think this would maybe suit this type of proportions more, since it is maybe sometimes is gonna go off-road. Maybe 1% of the time you're driving this, you might take it on a gravel road or something like that. But the proportions are those of a crossover SUV, so having some cladding in the bottom not only reduces the weight, but I also think it suits the overall section of these type of cars. The rear view, this is probably my favorite view of the new Grecale right here. I think it looks really cool. They said that these are inspired by the boomerang taillights, which are some of the coolest taillights ever made on a car from the 3200 GT. It's not as emphasized here, of course. This is a lot more conservative than that type of styling, but you still have some cues in there. And then you have this line also cutting into the body panel right here, which I think looks good. We have a proper bumper in the rear, very good. And then we have a not over-styled diffuser down here. We have the black type of graphics sticking out just far enough, in my opinion, to reduce the weight in the rear end. But as I said, this is the type of graphic styling that I would love to see in this part, in the side skirt here as well, to make this black, as I showed you up here on the side view. So talking about this new design language for Maserati SUVs, and this is what I want to show you, the comparison between the Grecale up top and then you have the Levante down here. So look at the positioning of the headlights. That's what I'll focus on here. Here we have almost like a Porsche-like style or positioning of the headlight up on the fenders. Looking at the Levante, it looks more aggressive. It looks more, in my opinion, more Maserati, having it like this in a single line in connection with the grille down here. So it would be moving the headlights of the Grecale down to this point, something like that, like we have on the Grecale. I think that would probably suit Maserati a little bit more. This looks more like a Ford Puma, which I'm gonna show you in just a second, just to show you how similar the front end of the Grecale is to the new Ford Puma. But it also feels like the Levante just fills out its frame better. It doesn't look as heavy as the Grecale, even though it doesn't have the black cladding here either, but I think it sits a little higher, and you can see the distance from the wheels here and the wheel arches. It feels like the Levante is obviously bigger, but it just feels like it fills out its proportions better than the Grecale up top. So now this is the comparison between the MC20 and the Grecale up here, and as I said, it feels like they took all the graphics down here. You even have this grille section right here being all black with no wing connecting it right here. Same kind of feeling here with this framing of the grille, and then go into the side intake right there as we have on the MC20. And the positioning, of course, of the headlights is in a similar position on the Grecale up there. Obviously a little stretched out to make it more of a crossover SUV front end, but that's something that just needs to happen. But if we look at the overall design language, I think they have a great DNA that they're starting now to implement in the new Maserati models, and all of these are going to have their electric equivalent in a few years after the launch of the internal combustion engines, which I think is a pretty cool idea as well. But now I want to pop in something very random here, but I think you're gonna be surprised when you see just how similar the Grecale is to the Ford Puma. So the thing is, we don't get the Ford Puma here in the US, and I think that's a shame because it looks really good. It's a beautiful little car, and I'm really sad that we don't get it here in the US. But looking now at the Maserati Grecale, it feels like we get a similar design here in the US, which is of course this new Maserati up here. So have a look at the headlights, for example, the positioning and styling of the headlights. We have almost the same kind of triangular shape of the headlight right here like we have on the Puma. And also the grille sits in almost exactly the same position. And look at the lower part of the intakes here as well. Same kind of styling that we have right here on the Ford Puma. We don't even have these body colored wings like we have on the Levante, for example. So it's almost I wouldn't say a copy, but a very inspired design by the Grecale from the Ford Puma. I quickly just want to talk about the interior here as well, because I think it's a good looking interior with the 12.3 inch screens right here. I think those will 12.3, and then you have the 8.8 inch screen right here for whatever controls you want to have, probably heated seats, ventilation and climate and so on. But overall it's a clean looking design, and then we have a piece in this design as in the interior, which I like to have that little stopwatch there. I think that's digital as well, I'm pretty sure, but still it gives it a bit of more of a traditional Italian design to have a stopwatch up there, up in the center of the console. So overall, I really like the new design of the Grecale. Is it Maserati enough? I'm not sure, but what is Maserati design? If we look back at the 3200 GT, for example, that had the headlights up here on the in the fenders as well. So it kind of goes back to a more design DNA from Maserati from maybe 20-25 years ago, and that's not a bad thing. I've said this before, I don't think every single car needs to look aggressive. Looking at the Levante, it is a very aggressive front end, but I also think it suits Maserati to have that on their biggest SUV, and I think this is a good transition, taking the MC20 design or front end and applying it onto a crossover SUV. And as I said, I'm happy that this is coming to the US, because we can't buy the Ford Puma, but we can now buy a similar design, which is going to be, of course, the Maserati Grecale.